Time just coming up to 8:15 now. And shop closed. That was the message posted on the doors of more than 200 stores, Burton's, Wallace and Dorothy Perkins, as the online retailer Boohoo moved in to buy the last of the Arcadia brands. The other big names, Topshop, Topman, Miss Selfridge, had already been sold off to Boohoo's online rival ASOS. Again, they bought just the brands. Square footage on the high street deemed surplus to requirements. So, if they're all going online once the lockdown lifts, will there actually be a high street to go back to? Well, Stuart Patrick is the Chief Executive of Glasgow Chamber of Commerce. Morning, Stuart.
Good morning.
Is there any interest from companies in taking over the massive shops on the high street previously occupied by the likes of Topshop and Debenhams?
Well, it's too early to tell at the moment, and obviously the market is rather constrained by existing lockdowns. But I think we have to be relatively pessimistic about demand coming through from the retail sector to take up those spaces. But we shouldn't entirely write off retail completely. I think one of the things to remember is that during the summer, as the lockdowns were released, in Glasgow city centre, for example, 77% of the weekend trade came back. And so there is still quite strong demand for retail in its bricks and mortar form. And we're also aware that retail as a sector has gone down substantially in demand during the crisis, and there hasn't been a direct shift from bricks and mortar to online. Online hasn't picked up the whole of that drop in bricks and mortar demand, so there's still some suppressed demand to be released when the lockdowns are over.
But still, you will be faced with lots and lots of empty shops, and some of them are absolutely enormous. I'm thinking about Debenhams and some of the House of Fraser stores which aren't going to reopen. Well, who takes over that sort of thing? What alternatives could you put those to?
Well, that's going to be the fundamental debate, and at the moment what's been happening prior to the crisis was that there was a shift from retail into leisure and hospitality, which of course is another sector that's been absolutely hammered by the crisis. But I think one of the major debates that's developed is the extent to which we can look at potentially more residential use in city centres. I mean, Glasgow as a city has a very low residential population. It's about half the size that you'd expect it to be for a city of our size, and so there is some potential for replacing retail with residential.
How fast could you move on that? Because, presumably if lockdown ends in the next 2 to 3 months and people return to the city centres, you want to fill that space up as much as possible to keep it attractive.
That's true, and in all honesty, shifting from retail to residential or other uses is not going to happen fast. I have to say that issues around rates and rentals will have an impact on that, and equally it's not easy to make these shifts and make the financial numbers stack up. So we are asking whether perhaps there is scope to reintroduce what was business premises renovation allowance, which ran up to about 2017. And mostly it was hotels that came through as a consequence of that. So we are asking if perhaps there's an opportunity to revisit that and bring it back with residential use as one of the outcomes. But that's not going to happen overnight. So yes, you're right. There's going to be a need for some form of incentive, some form of work to get these shopfronts used in the short to medium term.
How radically do we need to think about this? I'm just reading that there's a shopping centre that's going to be bulldozed in Stockton-on-Tees, I think, to make way for a park, to make it more attractive to be in the city centre.
Well, we do need to be radical. I have to say that Glasgow has actually set out a comparatively radical plan for improving the public realm. There is some investment monies already set aside for what's called the Avenues project, which is designed to improve the overall look and feel, widen pavements, and generally make it a much more attractive place for folks to dwell, to spend time. And at the moment, that has tended to be targeted at hospitality. But perhaps we do need to look at a wider mix of uses in the city centre.
OK. Stuart, thank you very much indeed for your time this morning. Stuart Patrick there from Glasgow Chamber of Commerce.